Welcome to Revelation Unraveled. I am your host, William Tapley, also known as the Third Eagle of the Apocalypse and the co-prophet of these end times. Well, I have some very amazing news for you on this program. And that is that one of my subscribers believes he has solved the riddle of 815. As you know, 815 has manifested itself quite a bit lately. For example, when the grand jury announcement was made in Ferguson, Missouri, which caused all those race riots, that announcement was made at 8:15. That was not an accident. That is probably the worst possible time to issue an inflammatory grand jury announcement, when you have thousands of potential rioters in the streets just waiting for that announcement. And 8:15 was also the time when this Sony cyber attack occurred. And that was pointed out to me also just recently. And now we have another 815 manifestation, and that is Flight 8501 that is missing out of Indonesia. Some of you, my subscribers, believe that that was a fulfillment of 815. I don't believe so. I believe this is another warning from the Illuminati, because the actual 815 event is going to be far more serious. It is going to be worse than 9/11. And that's why the subscriber who has solved this 815 riddle wants to be anonymous. He told me he has family he is concerned about. And I believe that he is right on the money, or he is very, very close to solving this 815 mystery. As you know, Ines Krupa says that the Holy Spirit revealed to her that 815 is not a day or a date or an hour, but rather it is a mathematical problem. And my anonymous subscriber agrees. He says that 815 does not give the day or the hour of this upcoming 9/11 event. It gives the location. And there is not just one location. He says that the 815 tells us there are two locations. First, he says we need to revisit that horrid iPad commercial from about a year ago. I did 4 or 5 programs at that time showing all the hidden symbolism. Remember this image of a woman giving birth. Those two large shapes on either side with the tiny stick figure being born in the center. That was not accidental. That evil image was embedded in the iPad commercial. No one has ever explained why they would hide an image of a woman giving birth. Was that a prank? Did the artist try to hide that in much the same way that Leo Tengoomer hides sexual images in his Denver murals? Or the way Disney artists often hide sexual images in their movies? And there were many other questionable images in that iPad commercial. For example, the woman in the cathedral, where she has the 2 pillars on either side. Do they represent the 2 pillars of Boaz and Jachin? Notice at the top of that image what looks like a smiley face. If we take a closer look, I think it's pretty obvious. Or how about that very weird image of a woman who looks as if she is crucified to a butterfly, which is growing horns? That is a pretty obvious image, at least to me, of MK Ultra mind control. Now, I thought at the time that the 2 false flags shown in this iPad commercial would occur at last year's Super Bowl. My anonymous subscriber believes, rather, it will occur at this year's Super Bowl. Let's take a closer look at that very evil image. I suppose those 2 large forms in the foreground on either side are meant to indicate hills or mountains, but they sure look like a woman's thighs to me. And in the center is a tiny stick figure being born. Does he indicate the little horn of Bible prophecy? That is the Antichrist, who the Illuminati are desperate to bring to birth at this time. They did not succeed in 2014. Will they succeed in 2015? Also in that image, we see what looks like two catastrophic type events. I think the sun probably represents a nuclear explosion. The gray smudge to the right of that is probably some kind of a smoky fire. And just below the horizon line, you see what looks like two possible figures, two bodies on the ground, or they could represent city skylines. In any event, I think what we see here are two major catastrophic type events, two 9/11 type events. And also, if we take a closer look at the top of that picture, we see several very interesting number expressions. Scene 11, shot 2. That shot 2 sure sounds like an assassination attempt to me. And could 11 and the number 121 represent a date? There are many possible dates in January. January the 1st, January the 11th. Or could the 2-1 symbolize February the 1st, which is the date for this next year's Super Bowl? Now let's take a closer look at that two-reel camera on the lower right. Now this is one of my anonymous subscribers' most amazing discoveries. If you turn that camera on its side, it represents 8:15. I think everyone can see the 8 in this diagram. I mean, the 8 is pretty obvious. Next to it is simply the 1. And that becomes fairly clear also. Now the 5 is a little trickier, but notice this gap here. That is not accidental. The 5 is basically an S shape, and once it's highlighted, I think you can see 8, 1, 5. Now the next image from this iPad commercial we really need to take a look at. Incidentally, this commercial is called Your Verse, and I'll put a link to it below. It seems that whenever the Illuminati have some dastardly deeds planned against humanity, they have sort of an honor code, and they have to tell you what they are planning to do. And if you don't figure it out, they have a moral right to perpetrate it on you. Another example is the Georgia Guidestones. They admit on there they want to wipe out 3/4 of humanity. And now this particular image from the iPad commercial, we see what looks like a storyline, and at the top of the storyline, it's called the scapegoat. Now, if that doesn't tell you that this is about a false flag event, I don't know what will. And there is a question at the top which isn't completely expressed, and it undoubtedly says, "What have you done?" And then Charles answers, he says, "Sometimes when the mouth offends, a hand is needed to cover it." Now, if that isn't a veiled threat, I don't know what is. Obviously, this iPad commercial is telling anyone involved with this 9/11 false flag event, if they talk, there will be consequences. I mean, it's going to take a lot of coordination to put two events on at very possibly the same time. At the bottom of this story script, we see the phrase, "Frank turns up the speaker, listens to the," and what is that last word? It's not quite complete. Obviously, it is interview. And of course, the interview is the name of that movie which caused the cyber attack against the Sony Corporation. Another interesting fact about what is shown in this script is if you take out the proper names, Frank and Charles, there are 15 words of dialogue and 8 words below that of the description. Another 8:15 manifestation. And now we come to the most amazing analysis of my anonymous subscriber. And he explains to us how 815 gives us the locations of this false flag event. He says what you need to do is to superimpose a clock face up on a map of the United States. Now, if we center this clock face on Ferguson, Missouri, some very interesting alignments occur. Let's draw a line through the little hand to Phoenix, Arizona. And why is that significant? Because that is the site of next year's Super Bowl, February 1st, 2015. And if we draw a line from the big hand, we find it points to just north of Raleigh, North Carolina, not that far from Washington, D.C. However, it is also possible to slightly turn the clock face. There is nothing that says the clock face must line up with latitude and longitude. And if we line the little hand up with Hoover Dam, as you can see, Hoover Dam is near Las Vegas, and we extend the line of the little hand to another possible false flag site, then the big hand points to South Carolina. And what is the significance of South Carolina? Well, Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina says that state may be the target of a nuclear attack. Here's what he said just about a year ago. Nukes in hands of terrorists could result in bomb coming to Charleston Harbor. That is a startling headline. And I know Alex Jones has discussed this on his program, and he thinks Senator Graham may have inside knowledge of this upcoming false flag event. Of course, it is not written in stone that the center of this 815 clock face must be Ferguson, Missouri. For example, at the end of the iPad commercial, we see a marching band in the form of a dinosaur marching down the field, and in the direct center, like a bullseye, is the big letter O. Does that indicate that maybe Ohio should be where we place the center of this particular clock face? Now, I realize I am putting a lot of 2 and 2s together. However, there are just too many clues for us to ignore, and we overlook them at our own peril, in my opinion. And I want to especially thank both Inez Krupa and my anonymous subscriber, because I believe together you have solved the riddle of 815. And just as it was pretty clever for the Illuminati to hide their secret plans in a clock face, it was equally brilliant of my subscribers to expose their plans for their next horrible false flag events. And as always, if any of you would like more information about my ministry, please visit my thirdeaglemedia.com website.